not included in the tapes that provide us with all of the material necessary to understand what Rosh Hashanah is about. So I'm hoping to some extent that you're all familiar with with what the Rosh Hashanah is about. But just to provide an overview, the idea of Rosh Hashanah is again that misconception and unfortunately maybe even the corruption of what Rosh Hashanah is about. In other words, it's something like Pesach. For those certainly who do not observe neither Rosh Hashanah or Pesach, the one idea that still remains is at least the family gathering for that evening to have dinner together. For whatever reason, that still persists, that idea. But I guess that's part of the corruption, because the idea of Rosh Hashanah is, in fact, not a family gathering. Just in fact, it might even almost, we might say, be preferable that they not all get together as a group, because then the Satan, who is permitted to be given full authority to rain his destruction and havoc for the ensuing year, here he can get a whole family together, you see, and he wouldn't have to go searching for individuals. He's got them all gathered together in one place. So obviously, this idea of Rosh Hashanah being a family holiday is absolutely a corruption. I know there aren't too many people who would use that kind of strong language, let's say, to almost meddle into an old tradition. But then again, Kabbalah is not tradition. Kabbalah, if anything, makes a concerted effort, certainly according to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, to do away with tradition as a misrepresentation of what the Torah is all about, a misrepresentation. And therefore Rabbi Shimon, in his Zohar, and I guess there are very few people alive today, at least, that would be prepared to contradict the sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We can contradict contemporary rabbis if we care to, but one whose image has persevered over the past 2,000 years in the form of the Zohar. In other words, there was no way to drown it out. It just persists like, I might say like the cockroaches, if we can use that expression, and say, even if the atom bomb came onto this world, they would still persist. So they have a stamina. And therefore, Rosh Hashanah is anything but a family tradition and a family get-together. But it's rather a very serious affair. Very serious affair. The reason we say it's a very serious affair is because the idea of being judged once a year, in other words, we all appear in the world court, not the one in The Hague, but the world court, the universal court, in which each individual is judged. The cassette, a complete cassette for the next 365 days that lie ahead are prepared for each individual. And for those who are maybe fresh to Kabbalah, you will learn, as those already involved for many, many years, that while we would like to consider ourselves independent, self-thinking human beings, nevertheless we are completely robots, and that whatever we do is really is robotic, and that it has already been prepared for us. It is only those few who make the effort to change their ways, and very few can change. It requires not only the stamina and the ability to decide that we will change, but what it also requires is the knowledge on how we can change. The knowledge. So therefore we begin with the knowledge of what Rosh Hashanah is about, and I quote, to make the connection so that we can all achieve a higher level of consciousness, because we all understand most of the things on that elemental level. To understand things in a more quantum perspective, one must achieve a higher level of consciousness. In other words, two people can view the same thing. One sees deeper into the matter as opposed to another. And what makes the difference? The idea is that one has achieved a higher level of consciousness, which we call a quantum consciousness, can see the same material, the same incident in a more broader perspective, as opposed to one who has a very limited form of consciousness. And as we know, one thing, I learned this many, many years ago, an old professor who I was very friendly with, told me and asked me if there was one thing that I knew that they don't teach at the university. And I couldn't answer him. And so he said, you know what? Expanded consciousness. That someone can understand things on a higher level than the level by which he was born with, by which the level which he approaches life, in which he goes through life. He says, it doesn't seem to be a course on how you can increase this awareness. And today I realize that there is no such course, except, of course, the course on Kabbalah, which you might say the objective is to expand the awareness of an individual, and once that expansion takes place, then he no longer sees things as they are, as they appear, but realizes that there are things that are motivating, things that are behind the scenes that we cannot even physically with the five senses observe them. So I begin today with a Ari to expand our awareness, and the fact that I just read the Ari, everyone will understand things on another level. Gam b'zeh tavin ma she'amar Chazal, and I repeat it in the original because the original is more powerful than the translation that will follow. V'zeh lashono, Amar Rab Yitzchak, lo haya tzarich haTorah latchil ela mechodesh hazeh. V'atamu lefi sheNisan hu Rosh Chodesh הנוקבה הנקרא זה השל Hashem, ולכן הירוי להתחיל בו התורה. The Ari is quoting, in fact, the first Rashi, his first commentary on the very first verse in Bereshit, when it says, and in the beginning, I'm translating only because for those who are not fully knowledgeable in the understanding of the cosmic code that is contained in the Bible, so I just translate it literally. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And from that point on, we have a full description of Genesis 1, and of course, as we know, there is also Genesis 2, which begins in chapter 2, which we don't want to discuss the difference between Genesis 1 and 2. It's already been set down in the power of the alphabet, so at your leisure, if you feel the necessity of understanding the full connotation of Genesis 1 and, of course, Genesis 2. And Rabbi Yitzchak asked the question that the Ari wrote, and asks the same question. Why doesn't it begin with Achodesh Hazeh Lachem? Shehu Mitzvah Rishona. Okay? What the question of Rabbi Yitzchak is as follows. In Exodus, the first precept that the Jews received upon leaving Egypt was Achodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chadashim. The idea of, I'll use again the ordinary vernacular, of sanctifying the new moon. There's a little precept, unfortunately unbeknown to most Jews, a little precept that is called sanctifying the new moon. You make a blessing. You bless the new moon. This is the way it's been accepted by those who still adhere to that precept. But briefly stated, what according to the Zohar, why this first step at the time of the Exodus should be in the form of the mitzvah, a precept of sanctifying the moon. And as everyone should ask, I mean, there couldn't have been more important mitzvot, more important precepts, like thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, etc., etc. I mean, he has to begin off by sanctifying the new moon. Is that more important than even the first commandment, I am your God? No, that came later. The first mitzvah is sanctifying the new moon. So what was the question of Rabbi Yitzchak? Because he was a Kabbalist and understood the internal meaning of this idea of sanctifying the new moon, that the reason it was the first precept, meaning it was the first piece of information that the Jews received on how to master and control their destiny. Chodesh Hazeh deals with controlling the cosmos, because we are all robots, as I said before, and there's no dispute about it. No dispute. If everyone who's taken the classes understands, it's been so easily demonstrated how we have so little control. And I'm not talking about the person who can stand up in this class or anywhere in the world and say, now look, cancer, out. I haven't heard yet the individual who can get up and say, cancer out. Or when the bankruptcy is there, he says, now look, I know you're here and I want you to leave. And situations of that nature. Nobody can get up and say, I have control. Why? Do you or don't you have control? The answer is 100% we are not in control. In 100% of the cases, we are not in control. Even though our egos may dictate and try to impress us with the fact that I am not in control. Who makes the decisions? Day in and day out. Without recognizing the fact that we are not making those decisions, but those decisions have already been ascertained and set down as a cassette for every single individual, every single human being. It's already been established in the cosmos. This cassette is transmitted through the channeling of celestial bodies, 7 planets, the signs of the zodiac, etc. And therefore, as all Kabbalists understood, those who studied the Zohar, and including Rabbi Yitzchak, when he said, why don't we begin with Achodesh Hazeh Lachem? Why don't we begin with the Torah, which is in chapter 12 of Exodus? That chapter should have replaced the chapter of Genesis, which means in the beginning. In other words, what was more important was not the historical fact of how it all started. Who needs that? What we need is an instrument or tools by which we can control our destiny. How do we control our destiny? How do we control our destiny? By beginning off with the idea of creation. This information that was given to the Jews, the first precept, and it's not a precept. You imagine someone would share his fortune of $52 billion with somebody else, and he would say, look, I'd like you to take half of my fortune. Would we consider that a precept? A mitzvah? So I would say, why? That's what beneficence? What good fortune I have. If this was the idea of Achodesh Hazeh, we call it a mitzvah. And it is a mitzvah. But what do you mean mitzvah? So, again, for those who are familiar and those who are not familiar, mitzvah comes from the word safta. It makes connections. That's what mitzvah means. Everything that's written in the Torah and the Bible in the form of commandments, because there is no such thing as a commandment. Command someone to accept $26 billion. You think it would be too difficult to persuade him without a command to accept the money? Or command somebody who's been ill for 48 years, and I'll command him to get well. I mean, if he had the tools on how to get well, he would gladly accept anything that would be presented to him so he can remove any of the misfortune which surrounds him. So the idea of mitzvah certainly is not in that frame of reference, as most Jews and non-Jews accept the idea of mitzvah. It has nothing to do with commandments. No commandments. It's tools. And therefore, when Rabbi Yitzchak asked the question, he says, what's so important about Bereshit bara Elokim? I mean, how it all began. All right, you want to provide a historical account and a recording of how the whole universe began, etc., etc. Fine, but how does history provide me with the tools on how to better my physical and my mental well-being? HaChodesh Hazeh, says Rabbi Yitzchak, the first, quote, precept, or the first information that was divinely revealed by Moses from the Creator, was the idea of how we can control the whole of the cosmos. That is essential. That was revelation. That was necessary, since we are all robotics, since we are not in control of our actions, since we're not even in control of our minds. I always ask, I'd like to see most people in the world sit down for 1 moment, 60 seconds, not 2 minutes, not 120 seconds, but 60 seconds, and let me see you demand all thoughts stay away. Let's see how long you can stay with that idea, thoughts stay away. Keep repeating it, thoughts stay away. After 10 seconds, you will already be thinking about some other idea and will have long forgotten. After 10 seconds, long forgotten the objective of thoughts stay away. That's how much control we have over our own lives. So, this idea of a Chodesh Hazeh, says Rabbi Yitzchak, was essential. And therefore, the Torah, instead of going into an historical account of who came first or what came second, and then the other questions, about the Creator rested the seventh day because he got tired, and all of the other nonsensical ideas concerning, the literal translation, according to the Zohar, it wouldn't even creep up. We wouldn't even have the long and arcane discussion of how old is the earth. Along comes scientists and tell you 4 billion years, like he knows what's 4 billion years. He knows what a frame of 4 billion years is, right? I mean, was he measuring it? He's measuring it with time. But don't forget, we shouldn't forget, or they shouldn't forget maybe, that Einstein said time is an illusion and time is a variable. So can you imagine with a variable that maybe today a minute, and sometimes a minute can be a year for us, and sometimes a year passes by. Like this year, for many of us, it may have passed by in just 1 moment. So what's time? But they already have figured out the Earth must be 4,000 years old, 4 billion years old, and according to the recording of Genesis, it's only 5,700, and shortly 5,751 years. We wouldn't even have to go into that. The Torah would be a source material for how we can improve our mental and physical well-being. And that was his question. So why did the Torah have to begin with Bereshit bara Elokim? What is the answer? That's even more surprising. And he answers like this. Because it says in Psalms, Koach masav higid le'amo latan lehem nachlat goyim. There is a verse in the Tehillim, verses 111 in Psalms, where it says the whole idea of why the Torah began with Bereshit, with the story of Genesis, is to say, who created the whole world? God. God created the whole world. That was the essence. And what is the importance of that? She'im yomru umot olam, that if the nations of the world shall say li Yisrael, listem atem, and certainly pertinent today, you people are thieves. Shekavashtem aratzot, shekavash goyim, you've taken away our land. Do you remember that there were people living in the land of Israel before the Jews came into Israel? And they could say, we were there before you. The Palestinians say, we were there before the state of Israel. But they can even go back before that and say, there were Palestinians there before the Jew actually came there. I don't understand the Arabs. I mean, if they're really looking for a good one, let him use what it says in what Rabbi Yitzchak says, because we don't understand his answer yet. But meanwhile, he's saying that the reason why the Torah begins with Genesis, meaning the light force, the force of the Creator, he did all this. And therefore, if he designated the land of Israel to be the land of Israel, therefore, he is the all-purposeful ruler, and he can decide who should be in Israel and who should not be in Israel. Therefore, it does not begin with Achodesh Hazeh Lahem, but it begins with the express purpose of stifling the arguments of the other nations of the world that might say one day, you have taken our land away. And what will be the response, continues Rabbi Yitzchak, then the Jews will answer, and I'm no commentaries here, Shebe'et goyim eim omrim lahem kol ha'aretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'natnu la'asher yasha beinav b'ritzono. And since all of this land belongs to God, he has given it to whom he saw fit to give it to. Since he is the all-purposeful ruler, everything belongs to him. And therefore, concludes Rabbi Yitzchak, we begin the whole Torah with the story of Genesis, to impress upon us who created this whole world. God. And therefore, if God decided to give the land of Israel to the Israelites, he has that right. He has that right. How that answers the question is still, at this moment, beyond me. Okay. Why can't we? And first of all, who says they may say that? In fact, it's only of late that the Palestinians claim they were there before before the state of Israel. And therefore, we have an equal right here as you do. I haven't heard anybody respond to the idea, but God gave us this land. Some do say that. And therefore, and God can give it to whomever he wants to give it to. But whether we are right or the Arabs are right, what does that have? Why is that more important than the well-being and the purpose of, according to the Zohar, why this whole Torah was given to the Jews? Was it given just to establish the fact that the land of Israel belongs to the Jews, or is there a whole series of mitzvot, meaning tools by which we can control our destiny? Obviously, the tools are more important. The argument, so maybe they're right on one score. But how we can improve our welfare and well-being, still, I think, uppermost in the minds of everyone would be that idea. What is more important? To me, this would have been more important. And furthermore, if Rabbi Yitzchak felt that the Torah should begin because this provided the Jewish people and the whole of the world with tools by which they can now control their destiny. They can talk to cancer and say, leave. They can talk to misfortune and say, go. This according to the Zoharic interpretation, is what HaChodesh Hazeh was about. And he raised that question. Then why did he feel that the answer that the land of Israel is ours, superseded, even according to his answer? Why in his own mind? He raised the question, and he knew what HaChodesh Hazeh contained. He knew what the purpose of HaChodesh Hazeh was all about. Why did he still feel satisfied in the idea that, well, we can say that the land of Israel is ours, and therefore you have to have the beginning of the Torah begin with Genesis? Tying in with this idea is, of course, the idea of Rosh Hashanah. We forget, although we know it, but sometimes we forget. We think it's not that important, especially for those who have already heard the tapes and have studied even the Zohar and, on Rosh Hashanah. We say Shana Tova. We say Happy New Year. We'll say Happy New Year. Happy New Year on Rosh Hashanah. And yet, just for those who want to, again, review it, in Numbers, in the Parshat Pinhas, where we have a discussion of all the holidays, in chapter 29, verse 1, it says, "V'chodesh hashvi'i be'echad lachodesh," which you are all familiar. Most of you who have studied Kabbalah are familiar with the Torah's indication of the month of Rosh Hashanah, Libra, which is the 7th month, indicating that what is the first month? In fact, it says so in Genesis. In Exodus. In Exodus, that we were just discussing, where it says, "Achodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim." What is the first month of the year? Nissan. Clearly states that. Now, if you wanted to interpret this in any which other way, which we cannot, we now have another verse in Numbers, which specifically states that Rosh Hashanah is the 7th month, not the first month. And yet, we all go around wishing everyone a Happy New Year. January is the first month in the Gregorian calendar. That's why they say Happy New Year. They celebrate. Why don't we celebrate it? In fact, it's not called a Chag. It's not called a holiday. Not called one of the holidays. There are 3 basic holidays. Rosh Hashanah is not one of them. And I guess because it's not a holiday, we don't celebrate New Year's the way those who follow the Gregorian calendar celebrate. But they say they have a reason. Because on that date, He had a Brit. He had a Brit. The founder of their religion had a Brit. Well, that's a happy occasion. And therefore they celebrate January 1st. I can understand that. But our New Year seems to fall into another category. Go to the synagogue. And yet we say Happy New Year. Why should we be merry and happy that day? Because it's not New Year. Yet we all say Shana Tova. But according to the Torah, again, chapter 29, in Numbers, verse 1, it clearly states, without any question, that Rosh Hashanah is the 7th month of the year. 7th month. And as I said, if that wasn't sufficient, we have chapter 12, verse 2, which says that Nissan, the month of Passover, is the beginning, is the top of the month, the first month. All right. In fact, continues the Ari, he brings down another discourse and disagreement between two Tanaim, two sages of the contemporary people around the time of the temple. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yehoshua, and I quote from the Ari, who brings the source reference, which is in the tractate of Rosh Hashanah. He says, Tanya, we learn, Rabbi Elazar Omer, B'Tishrei Nivra HaOlam. There's a discussion, when was the world created? When was the world created? Rabbi Elazar says, in Tishrei. Rabbi Yehoshua, Minayin shebenisan nivra olam, shenem vatose aretz deshe. Ava omer ze Nisan. And he says, no, the world was created in Nisan, not in Tishrei. Not in the month of Libra, but in the month of Aries, time of Pesach. And it looks like this discussion centers around a physical question. Was the earth created? Was this whole universe created in this month called Tishrei, when we actually celebrate Rosh Hashanah, or in Pesach? And this disturbed the Ari. It is very difficult to say, B'chas v'shalom, divrei echad mehem ein emet, and how could you say that, well, are they both right? Are they both right? Difficult. If they're not both right, that means one is wrong. And yet there is that usual Talmudical expression that Eilu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. When Tanaim said something, they were both right. One said yes and one said no. They were both right. How could they both be right? That one says the world was created in Tishrei and one says the world was created in Nisan. But actually, the question we raised about Rabbi Yitzchak and the answer to that question is really what the discussion between these two sages were concerned. What was the purpose? And why did Rabbi Yitzchak say the reason it started off with Genesis, so ascertain that the land of Israel was designated to be the land of the Jews? That's why it's called the land of Israel. Why was it so designated? So, again, most of you know, maybe all of you know, that the land of Israel is not called the land of Israel because God said, I'm going to give you this country. You know how much problems and troubles could have been avoided if God gave him Madagascar? Be no problems with the Arab, no problem with nobody. Every empire, every emperor throughout history who controlled the whole vast of the known world, whether it's the Persian Empire, Babylonian Empire, Greek Empire, Roman Empire, they all controlled such vast regions of land. Well, they wanted this little country over here. Had nothing else to desire but this one little country. What did they want here? So we know that what they wanted was because they knew. Jews today maybe don't know that's what the land of Israel is about, because if you go to Israel, you don't hear them talking about the energy center of the world. All they say is this is the biblical home of the people of Israel. Why was it chosen to be the biblical home for the people of Israel? The answer is because this world to maintain balance required people who would have the knowledge on how to maintain order and structure in the whole of the universe. Who would that be? That would be the Jews. How are they going to control and maintain a structure of continuity, of certainty, of peace on earth, and avoid chaos, destruction, by being located at the energy center of the world? In other words, what they had learned in Exodus, the first precept, was how they could maintain control over the universe. Now, with all of that knowledge, with all of the knowledge that they had, it's like you can have all of the knowledge of an atom bomb, but if you don't know how to press if you don't have an atom bomb at your disposal, the fact that you have all the knowledge on how to maneuver and how to create, but you don't have one, all of that knowledge is to no avail. Therefore, when Rabbi Yitzchak said about the idea that the other nations shouldn't come around and say, look, we were here before you. You robbed this land from us. What would they say? What would they say? Genesis. In Genesis, the creation of the world, the connection with God. Now again, we have to make this clear as well. When we are speaking of God, are we speaking of a man, an individual? Let's even be chauvinistic and say a male. Is that what we're talking about? Is that how we address God? Or, as the Kabbalah says, we are addressing God as a light force. A light force. Because we don't know what God looks like. We don't know what He is, but we know one thing. There is a force of God. The force called the light. That light is the force that can control this world. When Rabbi Yitzchak was discussing about God gave the Jews this country, what he was in essence saying that the knowledge that the Jew would ultimately get would have to be expressed where? In the land of Israel. That is the place that he would draw from. He can draw the light force from where? From the land of Israel. And so when they say, but you took it away from us, what would be their answer? Let me see you draw the light force. They didn't receive that information. They didn't have that information. Even when they were in that country, they were occupying a piece of land which was no different than Madagascar. But when the Jew would come and they would say, but you took the land away from us, if, like in the time of King Solomon, that peace reigned throughout the known world at that time. Why? Because King Solomon made use of the sanctification, the information that we call by the code name sanctification of the new moon. And therefore, with that information, the temple had a purpose. But the moment the Jews either lost the information, didn't care for the information, or became concerned with other matters other than maintaining the balance in the world, they had no place. Why should they be here? But wait, God promised them that this was their land. God only promised them because he wanted them to act as the channels with the knowledge that was revealed as the first precept, that they could maintain this balance. If they didn't maintain the balance, then what is their connection to this land as opposed to any other land called Madagascar? Therefore, says Rabbi Yitzchak, it began with Genesis, because Genesis teaches us what? It teaches us that there was the creation of the stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, signs of the zodiac, all of this. But also, it tells us that this land, when he created the land, and this is the way the Talmud goes on to express itself, he brings it down here and briefly, so I don't want to go into that because that's not the theme of tonight's lecture, is that in Genesis, it tells us this land, the land of Israel, is where there can be a maintenance or maintaining of peace on earth, just like it happened in the time of Solomon. But when the Jew does not understand what he's doing in the land of Israel, he says, but God gave it to us. God did not give it to us as Jews. God gave it to us because he revealed to us the information by which we can tap that energy. But if we don't tap the energy, then what do you mean it's our land? There's no such thing as this is our land, more so than anybody else. Proof of it is that there were the other nations. Why didn't he bring the Jew? Why didn't he bring and start Abraham right there? Right in Israel. And that should be the lineage. No, he had 7 nations that first occupied the land of Israel. And then along came the Jews. Why not immediately establish the idea, this is the Jewish country, and put the Jew there right away? And so God would avoid any of the questions that Rabbi Yitzchak says may be raised later. It would have alleviated a lot of problems. There would not have been any Palestinians there before who could say we were there. Because the land of Israel, without the knowledge, was zero. Was zero. And therefore, when he revealed this information, the information that, Baruch Hashem, we have at our disposal, fortunately, there are so few Jews who have exposed themselves to the study of Kabbalah. When I say so few, I mean in retrospect to all the Jews that exist in there throughout the world. Therefore, through this knowledge, it would belong to them. Therefore, what had to precede? That which was more important. More important than the knowledge was the energy center, the land. And therefore, Genesis begins with the concern and recording of the land of Israel, more so than the tools by which we can maintain control. Because without the land of Israel, with all of this information, those 2 letters that you see written there, which provides us with a control over this particular month, which I shall shortly discuss. Now we return with this explanation. We can now return to this discussion. When was the world created? When was the world created? One says in Nissan, and one says in Tishrei. What is the argument? When the world was created? Is that the argument? The Ari says that's a matter of record. It's a matter of record. Why would someone say that it was created in Nissan? From what we have just explained, we will understand now what the discussion was about. We have here a recording of a description of how land emerged, how the earth emerged, and I've explained all of that in an extensive chapter in Power of the Alphabet. What the earth is about, where does it say about? The earth was created on the third day. Earth was created, and the center, the energy center, was created on the third day. So there's no question, including Rabbi Yehoshua, who says that the world was created in Nissan. But what is creation? What is creation? That was the discussion. Creation can be creation of, you create a business. Okay? Now that you created a business, now you make money. Doesn't it always work that way? The minute you open up a store, you made money. Right? The answer is no. The answer is no. The fact that you have a plant doesn't mean you make money. Even though the whole intent of opening this plant was for the purpose of making money. But that, by and within itself, does not ensure the success. Other factors. What other factors? What other factors? Now, if you're still of a robotic consciousness, but if you're sitting in this room, then obviously you are not completely resolved to the idea that the Torah is just as it has been explained, but like the Zohar says, we must go deeper into its internal, its more sublime meaning. And therefore you know that there are astral influences. You believe, not you believe, but you know that there are astral influences. By so many signs in the physical universe, high tides, low tides, etc. And we don't want to, again, if you need validity as to the effect of astral influences, read The Star Connection, a book that gives all of the valid indications that astrology is not something that was thought up by some astrologer in Egypt, or some astrologer in Persia, or some astrologer in China. No, it was drawn up by Avram Avinu. The first recording of astrology was established by Avram Avinu in his book called Sefer Yetzirah, Book of Formation, for the express purpose of combating the negative forces of astral bodies, and, on the other hand, tapping the positive energies. Because the fact that I have a plant, and the fact that there are sales going on and everything, now we can expect the results, but nobody pays their bills. So you see, everything was wonderful, and it still didn't turn out. It still didn't turn out. Or, you made all this money, they sent you in the money as payments, and you invested it all in S&Ls, as an example. Right? You put all your money safely into a bank, some thrift bank, and you lost your money. So what guarantees are there? What guarantees are there? The one who can even think that he has control over his life is, like Rabbi Shimon says, is a stupid imbecile. That he thinks that he is in control. So I don't want to convince you. I said if you still need some convincing, you can get that in Star Connection. When Rabbi Yeshua said that the world was created in Nissan, what he was discussing was another side of the coin. He says, of course we know that even Rabbi Yeshua agrees that the world was created in Tishrei. The earth was created in Tishrei. The energy center was created. It's already. But you never make use of it. When did the world achieve a comprehension and a consciousness? The first time in history, unfortunately, it still continues that way, that people became aware of the fact that they are being controlled by the cosmos. And along came the Exodus, and for the first time indicated that humanity could begin to take control over their own lives. So what's more important? When was the world created? When was the world created? Created meaning in a sense, when did it become creative? When did it become creative? It is like the Zohar says, the same idea. It says in chapter 2 of Genesis, after Adam was born, chapter 2, verse 20. Vayikra Adam shemot lekol habehemot uleof hashamayim. What did Adam do? He gave names to all the animals and all of the birds, etc. He had nothing else to do. Maybe he had nothing else to do. After all, he was there alone. Eve wasn't born yet. So as a pastime, he decided he would give names to animals, give names to flowers, etc. Says the Zohar, he wasn't just giving names to the babies, but rather in Genesis 1, when everything was created, all the trees were created. They were created, but they were all in limbo, all in animated suspension. Everything, the fish, the fowl, the birds, the animals were in limbo, in animated suspension, in a potential creation. And when Adam called them, what does it mean? He added the dimension of control. He infused them with the physical reality of now bursting out. And now the grass began to grow. Now the animal began to move. Now the fowl began to fly. Or the birds began to fly. Up until that time, there was nothing. Now the question is, what is creation? Is creation before, or is creation at that moment when everything has become now physically expressed? Before, it was in a state of limbo, in a state of, it was created, but do you call that creation? Someone builds a plant, a shoe factory. He doesn't produce shoes, but he has the potential, all the machinery to produce shoes, but he doesn't produce shoes, but he has the factory. All of the potential is there, the leather, everything, but he doesn't produce it. It doesn't become manifested. All of this machinery and everything else is not manifest. This was the idea of Rabbi Yehoshua. When he said in Nissan the world was created, what does it mean in Nissan? In the month of Aries, the world was created. The world came out of a robotic consciousness state. You know what robotic consciousness means? It's a cassette that was playing without a consciousness. And the Rabbi Yehoshua says that while everything was created and people were performing and people were eating and people were fighting with each other, nothing was with a consciousness. People were doing things as they were dictated from the very beginning of creation. But along came the Exodus, and that's what the Exodus was all about. We say Exodus of bondage, so you know what Exodus is about. It certainly has nothing to do and doesn't even resemble in the slightest simile with the way Jews understand Pesach. Oh, what a celebration. celebration, the 4th of July, right? We still celebrate the 4th of July. No. Maybe for Americans, that's why they can celebrate the 4th of July on the 6th of July today. Because all it means is some tradition that we're celebrating. That's not what Exodus means. When we're discussing Exodus on Pesach, we are discussing the creativity today of what happened Pesach, because we were given the tools. Those who don't use the tools, for them, Pesach and the day before and the day after is meaningless. It doesn't have that creativity to produce something over and above that which they were created and brought into this world with. And that's the way they'll die. As they came in, that is the way they'll die. Nothing to show for their existence. They came in one day and 5 minutes later passed out, and no memory of their existence will be felt by anyone. Pesach was the exodus out of a non-consciousness being into a consciousness. That's what it was about. That was the secret that was provided for in Exodus. With this in mind, now we can turn back to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, 7th month. What happened on the 7th month? In the 7th month? What happened? The world was created? Is that Rosh Hashanah, the first day of creation? No. Maybe to the surprise of many of you, or maybe those who have heard it once before. No. The world was created 5 days before Rosh Hashanah. And the Ari and the Zohar tell us that on the day of Rosh Hashanah is the day Adam was born. Adam. We are celebrating, again, up until we achieve a higher and a greater awareness of what Rosh Hashanah is about, we'll say Rosh Hashanah is the celebration of the birth of Adam. The birth of Adam. And that's why all of mankind should actually celebrate Rosh Hashanah. Our birthday. All of us originally were born on Rosh Hashanah, because according to the Zohar, all of our souls were inclusive within that one concept called Adam, and therefore it is should be happy birthday. But in any event, according to the, I don't know why it's Happy New Year, it should be happy birthday, right? But we're all accustomed to saying Happy New Year, and even in the prayer books it does say Shana Tova. It says good year. Good year. But on that day, on Rosh Hashanah, is when Adam was created. So in other words, the first thing we throw out of our minds is the idea of the beginning of creation. It has nothing to do with that either. And as we said before, the first month is still Nissan. The Torah declares Nissan, Aries, as the first month, and it remains that way. It doesn't change. Adam was created that day. What happened that day? Several things. And the Ari makes it very clear when he says that Adam, on that day that he was created, which was Friday, Adam sinned that day. He sinned. He ate from the tree of knowledge, and many other things happened. Many other things happened. And that day, without getting into how he could have prevented it and so on, but he had free will, free choice, that day, Adam fell. That is the expression. That day he fell. He was driven out of the Garden of Eden as a punishment. I mean, he was in the Garden of Eden, and he was taken out of the Garden of Eden. Again, we must obviously go deeper than just to understand that he was sitting there in paradise and just beside. After what happened after we got finished calling all the birds and the animals by their names, then what did he have to do? And he did that all in one day and so on. In Genesis 1, which is Rosh Hashanah, in Genesis 1, in the day that Adam fell and Adam sinned, we all share in that sin. What does it mean we all share in that sin? Because we were all there. All souls were included in Adam, and therefore the world fell. Remember, as I say in Power of the Alphabet, volume number 1, this whole idea of the billions that have been spent on finding the dinosaurs. They're still looking for the dinosaurs, right? The answer is, all they had to do was look at the little lizard and they'd find the dinosaur. As we know that Adam was 100 feet high, 100 feet high. And you know what happened when he looked down at a dinosaur? It's like when we look down on a lizard. So you think he was afraid of a dinosaur? So that, they didn't create any extinction. Nothing falls into oblivion. Nothing. In fact, the endangered species that you hear so much about, there'll always be 2 around somewhere. Don't worry about it. In fact, there's always 2 that stay around somewhere, whether they fall into a zoo. But somehow, the balance of this universe remains the same. They're always speaking about, you see, well, if we had not taken these steps, this would have happened. But it's always what would have happened. On that day, we were all included, and we all fell. And more importantly, not that we fell in size. So what's the difference? The cockroach now, instead of being 50 feet long, 20 feet long, so now he's only 3 inches long. What's the difference? Are we afraid of a cockroach? No. Based on all that we have prepared in our introduction, we can now understand from another perspective what really Rosh Hashanah is about. If on this day, the idea of the fall of Adam took place, and he encompassed all of the souls, meaning you and I and the whole world, then Rosh Hashanah, which is already mentioned in the Torah, because it was not Rosh Hashanah. It was not Rosh Hashanah, the new year. It was not Rosh Hashanah, the new year, as we understand at the beginning of the world. Rather, the code in the Bible, when it says it is the 7th month, it's telling you, make no mistake. Make no mistake, we are not discussing here times. What we are discussing is 7, the number 7. And that's why it was designated the 7th month. Why was it designated the 7th month in the Torah? As we know, the whole Torah, unfortunately or fortunately, is a cosmic code. Without the Zohar, we have absolutely no way to understand the real implication, the real benefit of the tools that were given to us by virtue of the Torah. And therefore I go to the Zohar to give us clearly the idea about what Rosh Hashanah is when it says the 7th month. Because we now must bear in mind that it is no longer a happy occasion. It is no longer celebrating our birthday, because on that very day that we were born, that very day we experienced the fall of Adam. We experienced the beginning of chaos and disorder. That's what Rosh Hashanah is about. The beginning of Shana. And what does Shana mean? Year. And you should all ask yourself the question, the way I ask myself the question, who started off the 7 days of the week? You ever ask that question? Who started off the 7 days of the week? You know, what would happen if it went Sunday, Saturday, right? It started Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Super Candy is the 8th day. Toys is the 9th day. And then we'll start to circle over again, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I mean, anybody have an objection here? Seriously, think for a moment. What would be wrong? What would be wrong if the week had 10 days? Why does it have to have 7 days? Because we know that 7 is the 7 packets of energy that this world is governed by, ruled by 7 forces of energy, the 7th of which is what we call by the code name Malhut. It's a code name. For those who don't understand, because I see many new faces here today, the code name of Malhut means desire to receive. It means man's will and desire. Man's will and desire. And therefore, when the Torah in Numbers says Rosh Hashanah is the 7th day, and it's not a day of celebration of our birth, and say happy birthday, neither is it a happy occasion, but rather, because of what once happened, the creation, remember we have no one to blame but ourselves because we were part of Adam, we all contributed to the beginning of chaos and disorder. Along came Exodus, the most important period in the history of mankind, not only the Jew, it's a mistake, all of mankind, that for the first time, we, either independently or collectively, could create again and restore order and structure in this universe. That is on Rosh Hashanah. When it says we are judged, go into courtroom, judging whether we live or we don't live, this all depends on man's activity and action. It is dependent upon him how the year will spell itself out. He will determine his own cassette. Or rather, should I say, unfortunately, he can, because more times than none, we have experienced deterioration, chaos, death. And if you listen to your doctors, once you pass the age of 20, you get into this period of degeneration. Everything around us must be chaos. Wrong, says the Torah. I have given you in the Son the tools by which you can change all of this. By which we can change all of this. And specifically that we are in the age of Aquarius. We are and have already reached the day by which not only should we set aside that idea of the medical profession of degeneration, but rather rejuvenation. Because in the age of Aquarius, all of this information on how we can go back to the future, which is what this month is about, going back to the future. What do you mean going back to the future? Would we all want to be 18 years old, those who are older than 18? I think there isn't anybody younger than 8. Wouldn't we all want to be 18, 19? Do you know that scientifically it's a possibility? And according to the Zohar, why it didn't happen yet is only because we are Rosh Hashanah. We on Rosh Hashanah have not collectively created enough order in this universe. Because why do people get old? Is because we have not restored the Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a day on how, we cannot at least collectively do it, collectively restore the whole of the universe, at least our own environment should consist of order in our life. We have been given the tools. The trouble is the Kabbalah, the Zohar, the Sefer Yetzirah, and all of the infinite numbers of books that have been written concerning the age of Aquarius, that it is in this period that we can restore the fall of Adam. This is what Rosh Hashanah means. When you go, and if you don't know what you're doing on Rosh Hashanah, and if you think it's a family affair, and if you think you have to go in there and hear the shofar, and you've paid your dues because you heard the shofar, and the shofar is not blown according to the prescribed and definitive method on how you blow, and more importantly, says Rabbi Shimon, if you do not put in the right kavanot, the right meditation, you could have stayed home. Go play golf if you enjoy that more. And most of us, I think, would enjoy playing or enjoying ourselves somewhere else, but come to a synagogue and go through the ordeal. For what reason? Because we have lost the idea of what Rosh Hashanah is. Well, what was Rosh Hashanah? I thought it was a new year. We start the calendar that year. Wrong, said the Torah immediately. You're talking about calendars in the sense like the Gregorian calendar? The first month is Nissan. But this represents the fall of Adam. This represents the beginning of the chaos and disorder. And I want to quote the Zohar. B'yamim shel Rosh Hashanah, abet din mitaknim kisei shel hamelech ladun kol ha'olam. This day is called the Day of Judgment. What is the Day of Judgment? This day has already been established as din. Din in Kabbalistic terminology means things of chaos and disorder, generally. Chaos and disorder. It is shock. It is not that peace and tranquility. V'Yisrael nichnasim tehila ladun lefanav kedei sheyitrabei harachamim. Dahainu miterem shenitoreh haroges al rishei olam. Why does the world experience what it goes through? Year after year after year after year. And Jews have been praying for 2,000 years. What has changed? What has changed? Absolutely nothing. So, you know what they say? If the horse keeps coming in last, you run him again? I mean, how many times do you run him? 2,000 years? You run the horse that always comes in last? I mean, this is idiotic. Are we stupid? Maybe we are. But where is this logic? Nothing has changed. When I say nothing, I mean absolutely nothing. In 2,000 years, nothing has changed. Says the Zohar, Umishpat amo Yisrael dvayom biyomo, mahu yom biyomo, elehem bet yamim shel Rosh Hashanah. These are the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. They both represent different aspects. One is chaos, the first day, and the second day, or in Aramaic terminology, it is Dinei Kashya. And one is disorder. You know, the uncomfortable things that we all experience in life. Nothing monumental, nothing major, but it's enough to get us upset. That's why we have 2 days. 2 days of this chaos and disorder. And that's why we have 2 terms. One is chaos. That was the first day. Complete chaos. What does it mean complete? The dinosaur became a lizard. Adam. Everything was reduced in consciousness. Not only, why were they reduced physically? Because their consciousness was reduced. Now it says we have these 2 days by which, says the Zohar, we can restore. We can restore only in these 2 days. Why? Why these 2 days? Because in these 2 days is when it happened. When it happened. Why can't we correct it in another day? Says the Zohar, when God planned the creation, it was created in Tishrei, the month of Libra. Why the month of Libra? Why the month of Libra? Scales. Okay, scales, judgment. But in that day, which is the contributing factor of called the shofar, on that day you have two scales. Two scales. And you have the central column that maintains balance. Maintains balance. The shofar is that central column, the mediator between left and right, good and evil. It's the mediator. It creates a balance. To support this balance, we are little people in the whole quantum of this universe. How can we, and I must maintain a balance for me everywhere in the world, for me. Because if I haven't touched base on everything that can affect me, I haven't created order in my own personal life. God, in His infinite wisdom, knew the possibility that man could fall. He already created the safeguard. The safeguard called a shofar, called a Rosh Hashanah in advance. That, when we go into that synagogue, and if you know how to blow, and when I talk about blowing, I'm not talking about the beautiful sound that comes in. If you are going to a synagogue, and that man is blowing, he doesn't know what he's blowing, it is like the telephone wires without speaking. Nothing less and nothing more. If that man has not studied the kavanot, the meditation that must be ingested, infused into that shofar blowing, forget it. Go play golf. You have served no purpose. Now, this is radical. I mean, nobody ever said that, You know what? Everyone who's been saying some other line has come in last for 2,000 years. Maybe if we turn into another path, maybe we could start coming in third and fourth, maybe even first. The way we restore on these 2 days, not any other day, can't do it. Even on Shabbat, we say we can draw powerful energy on the Shabbat. It lasts only 6 days. Only 6 days. Whatever that means. On Rosh Hashanah, there is only one purpose, is to restore the chaotic condition that you and I created back in the time of Adam. In the time of Adam. So when we get together on Rosh Hashanah, and we are getting, and this is the first year that we will have such a turnout. Again, it is by invitation. We do not put a sign out. High holidays, reserve your seats. Reserve your seats. So we have another seat taken up. Who wants that? We need people. We need people. And we do this every year, and I want you to know we are seeing the fruits of that labor. You can have all of these people concentrating, and everyone, and those who don't even know what to do are instructed. Those who attend Rosh Hashanah services. What service? Talking about a war here. A war that depends on us to restore. As it is, we have created the chaotic condition. That already has been cassette from the day one. From the day one, which is called Rosh Hashanah. The day Adam was born. He had this opportunity to maintain the law and order or to create a chaotic condition, which he did. Now, each and every single year, we have no one to blame but ourselves for the chaotic condition that we may experience throughout the whole year. No one to blame. Why? Because we are given the opportunity every Rosh Hashanah to blow that shofar. And that shofar is what? Tradition? No. In fact, as you all know, before we begin blowing the shofar, we recite the verse from Psalm, Ashrei Ha'am Yodeh Teruah Hashem. It doesn't say, praiseworthy is the nation of Israel that hears the shofar. If all it meant is to sell a seat, and therefore the person will hear the shofar, it should have said, Shomea Teruah, the one who hears the blowing. It doesn't say that. It says the one who knows. And if you don't know, you haven't changed nothing. You're still running the same horse that has been running for 2,000 years of chaos and disorder. So Rosh Hashanah is that cosmic day by which we can go back to the future. We go back to the day one of Adam. Day one of Adam. It is the only way we can do. The question is, can you go back to the future? How do you go back to the future? How do you go back to the future? How do you go back? To restore is not enough, like I always say, someone who steps on my foot. He says, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I say, you're not forgiven. You think I'm a terrible person, right? Why do I make that point of saying you're not forgiven? I said, you're saying I'm sorry. My foot still hurts. What does your sorry have to do? What, are you being polite? But my foot hurts. Now do something, restore my foot, that it doesn't hurt me. He says, I'm sorry. What's this expression, I'm sorry? God, it's Rosh Hashanah, I know I'm in judgment. I'm sorry. God says, yeah, but you know what you did last week, the week before that? Now you're coming in, and we should even think. We do tshuva. What does tshuva mean? Repentance. God, I'm sorry. According to the Zohar, the word is tshuva. And tshuva and the word repentance has no place in the lexicon of Kabbalah. Repentance, I'm sorry. No such animal. Never existed, never will exist. Then what is tshuva? Tashuv. Hey, you've got to go back. Got to go back to before the whole crime started, before this chaos and disorder, because it is the only way you can restore it. You have to place yourself in a position before the whole act of ourselves began, and now restore it from its very inception. Got to go back in time. Can you go back in time? Yes. Yes. How do you go back in time? How do you go back in time? This is what we're doing on Rosh Hashanah. When we get together, unfortunately, we don't have all the facilities, and we want people to be very concentrated because we want to have a good year. We want a good year, and we know it's up to us to have that good year. Because a good year does not come without effort. And the effort is not just hearing the shofar. We must go back in time, called tshuva. Tashuv, go back. Go back. The Zohar teaches us how we go back. We go back. Now maybe we haven't experienced this whole idea of rejuvenation, regeneration, but we are. Since the day, and I checked it, it's close to it. I can't pinpoint the day. But since the day when Kabbalah became widespread for the layman in the street, can you imagine? The one who's not knowledgeable. He reads the Zohar today. A crime, of course, but what can you do? This is the crime Jews commit today. They're beginning to read the Zohar, even though they're told by rabbis, you've got to be so holy before you can touch the Zohar, right? So it's one of the crimes I guess God may forgive us. Through the Zohar, says the Zohar, and all Jews who attend synagogue, recite that same Zohar, and you know what? They don't even know why they're doing it. And furthermore, they don't even know it comes from the Zohar. Before we take out that Sefer Torah, we read a portion that is comes from the Zohar, even though you're not supposed to read anything from the Zohar unless you're so knowledgeable and you're 40 and the whole bit, right? Can't imagine why they didn't exclude that prayer from the prayer book, since it's forbidden to read the Zohar. But everybody reads that portion of the Zohar. It seems that they changed the laws in midstream. But what's unfortunate is they are already reading it and don't even know what they have to accomplish. If they don't know what the objective is in reading it, they have lost it. And that reading, as one example of reading the Berich Shemay before the Torah is taken out, is taking us back in time. And since, there was a period from Adam, the lifespan went down. I think it was a minimum of 35. You know what the lifespan is today? The lifespan today? 75. What happened? What happened? Well, of course, if you listen to doctors, you know what they'll tell you. Medical technology. There have never been so many people sick as we have today. They can't build enough hospitals. Where's all this medical technology? Where is it? Something is happening. I say what's happening is the widespread reading of the Zohar, which began in North Africa, and is contributing to the day that we will be living not until 100. I'm meeting more people, centurions, than I've ever met before. I thought you live until 80. That's a ripe old age. You live until 90. That's rare. I want you to know, in the past few months, I have met people over 100 years old. And I want you to know they're not in wheelchairs. And I want you to know they're not senile. Something is going on. Do you want to be part of this? Something is going on. And they predict now, in 10 years, there will be over 1 million centurions here in the United States alone. Oh, what happened? Oh, medical technology? I can tell you one secret about these centurions. They never go to a doctor. It's a rule of all centurions. They have never gone to a doctor. So I don't know how medical technology has affected these people yet. Maybe through some metaphysical, voodoo, maybe they're throwing in a lot of long life into these people. Something is going on. Something is going on. What is going on is Rosh Hashanah. Very powerful. Very powerful. And the more people become involved in restoring the chaos, the more effect we will have on others who are robotic and are still riding the last horse that comes in last at the finish line. They're still with that old, outmoded, and already experienced disaster of wars, chaos. We can change all that. And we are in that period. It's going slower for most people. The age span. Not everybody is sick today. But we hear so much, we think everyone must be sick. Not at liberty, but I said it for the first time this morning. I think we have come to the most simplistic field in medicine. Simplistic form of medicine that exists in the world. Even I didn't know about it, but I'm looking for it because I know it's out there. All of these ideas, for those who are closed-minded, for those who run to Rosh Hashanah because it's the thing you got to do, forget. Those people will never make it. Never. It is people who understand the internal, the sophisticated meaning of Rosh Hashanah. And it's an opportunity, and I must share this opportunity because there's a lot of new people here. We'll have a big crowd from Baruch Hashem all over the world. Representatives from all over the world are coming so they can go back and share this strength. But we must learn the first new lesson. We have no one to blame but ourselves, but we also have the opportunity to overcome and restore chaos to order. A new age. And those who are divinely inspired, and divinely inspired doesn't mean God comes down and talks to you, but those who only open up, like it says in the Zohar, open up an opening no larger than the opening of a needle, the eye of a needle. That's all you need. But if you continue on with this tunnel vision, as mankind today is accustomed to, you can't make it. All that is required is just to lift yourself up and begin asking questions. Do not accept things because that's the way they are. It was never meant to be that way. As Rabbi Shimon says, it is only a fool who does not ask questions. Religion was not meant to be robotic. So I encourage everyone, our life depends on these 2 days. The life of a whole year depends on these 2 days. Therefore, we wish everyone Shana Tova, that the chaos and order that is subscribed and prescribed on this day for us shall be different. But it can only be different if we will it so and we make it so. And a good year to everyone. Shana Tova.